Savings and Loan.
Founded in 1905, Yakima Federal has been serving the local community for 120 years.
With 10 locations across central Washington, including Ellensburg, Yakima, and the Tri-Cities, Yakima Federal offers checking and savings accounts, clear choice student checking, home loans, and more.
For more information or to find a branch near you, visit online at yakimafed.com or call 1-800-331-3225.
Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to, of course, another episode of Vicky'S Dungeon. Another episode, another week. Here I am again. I almost didn't make it this week to the show because I'm just tired as a mother effer, as they say. But you know, I'm here, man. I'm here. To quote the character at the end of the tragic, sad, depressing movie The Wrestler, when the wrestler is about to go in for his final match of his life that's probably going to kill him, to quote the person talking to him before he goes into the ring, to quote them, I'm here. But yeah, man, I'm happy to be back. I almost didn't show up, man. I just was almost too damn tired to show up. But you know what? I'm here, I showed up, and I'm happy to be here, man. You know, I'd rather be here than napping in my bed because, I don't know, it's a better deal. I get to talk about movies and stupid, crazy stuff that I love and sip on some coffee. I was going to have a Monster before I came here, but it's just gross, man. Monsters suck. The only context that I ever want to have an energy drink now is if I'm in the gym, I guess. And if it's not that, it's only coffee for me because coffee... It's better. It's smoother. It's comfier. It's better. It just is. Yeah, you gotta love it, man. But this week for the show, I'm gonna be reviewing the movie Phantom of the Mall from the 80s, starring Pauly Shore. You gotta love Pauly Shore. Honestly, I was looking for an underground, just movie that people don't talk about a lot. That's what I try to do with the show. I try to watch, more obscure kind of retro media movies, and I came across this movie, Phantom of the Mall, and I just thought, oh, that sounds cool. It's like a movie about a slasher kind of Phantom the opera character, but instead of it being an opera, it's in the mall, and that sounds awesome. And it's in the 80s, so of course I'm gonna like it aesthetically. And then what really sold it for me was when I was watching the trailer, and then I saw Pauly Shore in it. I went, okay. It's in the 80s. It's a phantom in a mall. It has like that. It's like, it has that underground retro, obscure media kind of aesthetic vibe to it. And to top it all off, you have the guy who was in Biodome and a bunch of other stuff. You have Pauly Shore. So it sold me enough to check it out. And we're going to review it later after I go over a little bit of nerd news and then some rambling for me for a little bit. And then, yeah, we'll get into the show, into the movie review. But this week, the music that we're going to be playing is one of my personal favorite artists. Per their permission, thank you so much, Shogun's Castle, for giving me permission to play your music. We're going to be playing this artist who plays dungeon synth, but specifically inspired by feudal Japan history. So it sounds really cool. So it's like Japanese samurai. It's like samurai dungeon synth. There's many other genres you could attach it to, but the one that I stick to that's easiest to remember for me is a samurai synth. So you gotta love it. I mean, I know other people call him like kabuki ambient and kind of Japanese folk, retro synth, but I don't know. I think samurai synth is just the easiest to remember, but he encompasses a lot of different stuff. But yeah, playing us in is going to be 2 tracks from his first album, self-titled. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, it's not self-titled. It's from I forget the title. It's The Noble Truths of the Samurai. It's that one. The 8 Noble Truths of the Samurai. Sorry. And the first track we're going to play is my favorite track, followed by a track that I also love from that album. This first track is called Benevolence, and that will be followed by Courage. Hope you enjoy. Talk to you in a minute. All right, that was Benevolence and Courage from Shogun's Castle from his first album, The Eight Noble Virtues of a Samurai. Pretty interesting stuff. That's definitely, those are definitely my two favorite tracks from the album for sure. Really just interesting sounding music. I love the kind of ambience and atmosphere it gives you, and it gives you that kind of almost dreamlike vibe of being in feudal Japan, training with the samurai or the samurai and all that kind of stuff. And it's really, really cool. I'm a fan, dude. I'm a fan. Been listening to him for a few years now, and I think the first time I heard his stuff, I was like, man, this is just so interesting. In the days when I worked retail, I would always like put a headphone in while I was working to either listen to music or podcasts or, what have you. And that was one of the artists I discovered while working. And I remember just hearing the music through my headphone, and I was like, whoa, this is like, I've heard Mortis, I've heard Old Sorcery, I've heard, all the, classic guys, Thief, who else in the dungeon synth genre, Old Tower and all that stuff. And, I was aware that there was gnome synth, and there was also grandma synth, like Grandma's Cottage and stuff like that. Bunch of different styles, but I had never heard samurai synth before, samurai synth. And I remember hearing that and just being like, oh my God, I've never heard anything like this. And, for me personally, I just love stuff that has atmosphere, but specifically like a dreamlike, almost surreal atmosphere where it almost feels like you're in a dream, like I said. And that definitely gives that vibe. So I love it. But yeah, thanks again, Shogun's Castle, for letting me play your music. You can check them out on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, Bandcamp, and you can check out this album, which is called The 8 Noble Virtues of a Samurai, and it's pretty amazing stuff. And we're going to be playing other music from one of his more recent releases as well later on in the show. But let's get into the first part of the show. Let's get into a little bit of fantasy news, but of course, we got to get a hey yo, Scott Hall.
Hey yo!
Thank you, sir. But let's get into fantasy news. Oh, yeah. So, not a whole ton of stuff this week, really. We got, for Game of Thrones news, Duncan Egg is sadly over, but it was a great series. You heard me just rave about it and love it every time I did a show, talking about it. And, but we do have Aegon's Conquest as the next major spin-off in the Game of Thrones universe coming out that will be, released alongside Duncan Egg seasons as well as future House of the Dragon seasons. Even though we only have one more season after this year, I think it's pretty safe to say that we'll probably get Aegon's Conquest in the next. I could see it coming out like the first year that we don't have House of the Dragon, actually. So it might be a few years, but it's in heavy talks to talk about. It's in heavy talks to be a movie as opposed to a series, which I think is a better move, to be honest, because if you read the actual lore of the Game of Thrones universe, the fictional continent that it takes place on is Westeros. And Westeros before was conquered by the Targaryen dynasty, which is the dynasty that rules over Westeros for 300 years and, pretty much is overthrown right before the events of Game of Thrones begin. The guy who conquered Westeros and established the Targaryen dynasty, that being Aegon, who's forever known as Aegon the Conqueror, and he's basically, a fantastical kind of version of not Aegon the Conqueror. I was going to say just his name again. But he's kind of a fantasy version of William the Conqueror, of course, being the first, probably the earliest known. Not earliest known, like he is firmly the first king of England, which is pretty interesting. And I was surprised to learn that the current monarch of England is a complete straight descendant of William the Conqueror. I didn't know that for the nearly 1,000 years since the Normans invaded England and established, anyway, I'm not a history aficionado, but you know what I mean. I didn't know, though, that it had been close to 1,000 years since William the Conqueror became king, which is pretty incredible. And it's all pretty much the same family. They don't have, I think, a traditional last name. Like they haven't had the same last name for the thousands of years, or thousands, the hundreds of years that they've been in power, and close to 1,000 at this point. It's pretty much due to the fact that William the Conqueror straight up didn't have a last name, because this was the time in history in Europe where last names weren't, a thing with everybody, at least. Weren't super common. It was more common to be called, like William of York or something like that, as opposed to being like William, Robertson or whatever you're going to say. But Aegon the Conqueror in the Game of Thrones universe was heavily based on William the Conqueror, which is really cool. And the author of the books, George R. R. Martin, he just was like, I'm going to take this historical figure and do a fantastical version of him. And instead of this guy conquering, a chunk of the British Isles and establishing, England, instead, I'm going to have this guy conquer this continent the size of, South America, which is it's basically just, the British Isles, which just blown up to be the size of South America. And instead of him conquering with armies, he's just going to do it with dragons, which is really cool. And that is the story that the movie is going to be based on. It's going to be based on that kind of 2-year period of Aegon conquering the Seven Kingdoms. And, I think it's a smarter idea to just make it a movie, because if you read about the actual lore of Aegon conquering the Seven Kingdoms, it's really cool, don't get me wrong, but it's not it's not on the level of like, oh my God, there's so much going on here that this should be a series. There would be a lot of filler, because I believe in the chain of events, briefly, it starts with Aegon sending out ravens, which in the Game of Thrones universe, to communicate long distance, they have ravens that they would just attach letters to and have them fly to wherever castle they were going to. And so he sent ravens to all the kings of Westeros, because at this point Westeros was divided into 7 different kingdoms, and all of them basically said, there will be only one king in Westeros now, and you now have the opportunity to sit down and or kneel to this king and keep your lands and titles, but you'll be known as lords, not kings anymore, and you'll answer to Aegon. And of course, nobody, bent the knee to him, and I think the chain of events is pretty much that I believe the first castle that he actually burnt down was Harrenhal, which we've talked about it on the show. Harrenhal being this overwhelmingly ginormous castle, and I believe that's where the Kingdom of Rivers and Isles, I think it's called, or Island and Rivers, I think it's called, was conquered that way, because their king was destroyed, and the greatest castle in all of Westeros was destroyed. So of course that kingdom fell, and then you had the Westerlands and the Reach kneeling to Aegon after Aegon and his 2 sisters, Rhaenys and Visenya, rode their dragons, and they basically just destroyed this enormous army of 50,000 men attacking their dragons, but they're dragons. And in the Game of Thrones universe, dragons are unbeatable by medieval standards. And so they just destroyed this 50,000 man army pretty easily by just burning them all. And then after that, you had those 2 kingdoms, the Westerlands and the Reach, kneel to him, and then his rumored half-brother, Orys Baratheon, rides to Storm's End and just has a siege battle with Argilac Durrandon, the last of the Storm Kings, and he wins that battle. And so they get the Stormlands that way. And then I believe it was Rhaenys or Visenya, I'm not really sure if I remember, who flew to the Vale of Arryn, which is the other kingdom, the kingdom in the mountains, the kingdom of, I think it's just the kingdom of, I know it's called the Vale, but you know what I mean. It's a mountainous kingdom, and it's called the Vale. There you go. And the current king at the time, who was a little boy, Robert Arryn, I believe, and his mother, who was the Queen Regent, because he was too young to rule, because he's a little kid. They had, I think, Rhaenys or Visenya, I forget which one, flew to the Eyrie, which is the main castle of the Vale. And I love how they won the Vale here, where because he's a little kid and he's the king and they have to obey the king at that point, although his mother is Queen Regent, he's still the king, which is pretty interesting. And I'm guessing that basically means that, yeah, she's doing all the ruling, but if he wants something to happen, you have to listen to him, kind of deal. And I love that how either Rhaenys or Visenya was like, okay, he's a little kid, and what kid wouldn't want a dragon ride? And so basically they just say to him, hey, if you give us the kingdom, I'll let you ride the dragon. And, and I love how it was written here in the histories and lore, where it was, Robert Arryn was a king, and then he got on that dragon and went for a ride, and then when that dragon landed, he came back a lord. and that's how they won the Vale. And then the Northern Kingdom was won by just Torrhen Stark just straight up kneeling to Aegon, and forever known in the histories as the king who knelt. And he had a meeting with Aegon, and they talked about whatever. A lot of people think it was them talking about the frozen apocalypse that was coming their way in the future, which motivated Aegon to conquer the Seven Kingdoms so that they could, be united together against this apocalyptic threat that was going to come at some point, but they didn't know when. And people theorized that's what they talked about, and that's what got Torrhen to kneel. And that combined with Torrhen also finding out or hearing about how every other kingdom fell to Aegon pretty easily. So that's how Aegon conquered 6 of the 7 kingdoms. And then on top of that, he actually never won Dorne, which was the southernmost kingdom, the desert kingdom, the southernmost kingdom that's just full of deserts and, red mountains and stuff like that. And that's just because the Dornish were just so good at guerrilla warfare that Aegon, had he kept fighting the Dornish, he would have eventually won probably, but he just got so sick of it that he just ended up being like, all right, you guys can just, I don't care. Like, I would eventually beat you guys, but it's been 2 years. I'm tired of war. Like, I'm good. And also that combined with the fact that the Dornish sent a letter to Aegon and his great love, which was Visenya Targaryen, because the Targaryens were known for practicing incest, which is, pretty hot topic that I won't go into, but it's probably worth knowing when you get into Game of Thrones. They did it to conserve the bloodline, to keep it pure, because the Targaryens were of Valyrian descent, and they were able to bind themselves to the dragons due to their Valyrian blood, and that's why they kept the bloodlines quote unquote pure by marrying, within the name of Targaryen. And so Visenya was the woman that I believe Visenya was. I get the names mixed up because he married both Visenya and Rhaenys. But the one that he loved, that he married out of love, and the one that he married out of duty stayed alive after the war, and the one he married out of love died fighting the Dornish while it was Rhaenys. It was Rhaenys. Because Rhaenys rode Meraxes, and that's where that dragon died. And Rhaenys dies in Dorne fighting the Dornish, and her body was famously kind of lost. Like, we don't know what happened to it. And then after 2 years of war, Aegon gets a letter when the Princess of Dorne shows up to discuss peace, and she gives him a letter, and we don't know what was written in it, and he apparently clutched the letter so hard that his hand bled, and he immediately flew to Dragonstone, which was the castle on an island off the coast of Westeros that the Targaryens lived in for hundreds of years before they decided to conquer Westeros, and he flew there and did something that we don't know. And he flew back and said there will be peace between Dorne and the other kingdoms. And what's worth noting also is the reason why the traditional title was still King of the Seven Kingdoms at that point was because the Kingdom of Island and Rivers, with Harrenhal that we talked about earlier, was split into 2 kingdoms, the Iron Islands and then the Riverlands. And so that's why it became 7 kingdoms. So we don't know what was said in that letter, and we don't know what Aegon did at Dragonstone. However, it's pretty likely that Rhaenys died in Dorne from being tortured, and she wasn't actually killed in battle. It's likely that Meraxes was killed, because we know for a fact that Meraxes was killed by a spear that was shot at him from a ballista, and that's what killed that dragon. But it's a lot of fans speculate, and I think this probably is what it is that Rhaenys survived the fall, and that the Dornish tortured her to death by bringing her back to a dungeon, and that in that letter it said that that's what happened, and that her remains were being sent to Dragonstone, and Aegon flew to Dragonstone so that he could give her a traditional Valyrian funeral, which was the body being burned, because the Targaryens are of fire and blood, as opposed to burial. And so because of all that, people believe that, Aegon got some kind of closure from all that with Rhaenys, and that he decided to be like, okay, you know what? I have some closure. They're offering peace, and they just gave me her remains. I'm tired of this frickin' war anyway. It's fine. Let's just end it. The realm is united enough, and I'm sure if the apocalyptic war from the north actually happens, where the others and, their army of ice zombies and this frozen apocalyptic threat, if it actually arises, I'm sure that the Dornish would be willing to, comply and at least ally with us if it happens. So, I'm sure at that point he just, had all that going on in his mind and just was like, all right, let's just end it. And so that's the whole story of Aegon's conquest. And that being adapted into a film, I think makes better sense than like a series of like seasons of like, I mean, it's a lot that happens, but at the same time, it's not this enormously epic conquest that happens where he's going all over Westeros fighting these enormous battles. Like really what happens is, it's how many battles happen in it? You got the Battle of Harrenhal isn't even a battle. He just surrounds Harrenhal with like his little army that he had, which was like 30,000 men. And then he had his one dragon, which was Balerion the Black Dread, which was another reason why I'm excited to see this is we'll get to see Balerion the Black Dread, which was the biggest dragon in the history of Westeros. This dragon that had a 700-foot wingspan and was so big that its shadow would cover entire towns. And it's just this, and its head was so big that it could just swallow a horse whole. And as a man that rides horses for fun and isn't particularly amazing at it, but I'm well accustomed to the size of horses, that's a big effing dragon. But we know from Harrenhal that wasn't even a battle, just Aegon, and it's actually a cool scene where Aegon meets with Harren. Harrenhor, his name is Hoare, I believe it's spelled. And he meets with him outside the gates of Harrenhal, and he just says, "Yield now, or I'm gonna, burn your castle down." And he goes, "Well, you're an idiot because stone doesn't burn, and we can wait. And it's a pretty big castle with a lot of provisions, so I don't really care if you attack. It's not going to work." And then Aegon just says, "When the sun sets, your line will end." And this really cool thing happens where Aegon flies Balerion so just higher and higher into the sky until Harrenhal, this enormous castle, looks like an anthill to him. So he's really high in the air. And then he just flies straight down towards the castle and just engulfs the top of it in flames, which burns everybody that's on the walls, outside of any buildings. And the fire just goes in through, I'm guessing, the wall, the castle's like windows and stuff like that. And just, to quote Tywin Lannister from the main series, Harren and his sons roasted alive within these walls. And it didn't turn Harrenhal into a complete ruin. It was still a functional castle at that point, but it was pretty screwed up enough that it was basically a ruin that was fortified enough to still be a strong enough castle. But it was forever cursed after that, with ghosts and, stuff like that. So it's pretty interesting stuff, man. But that's me rambling about the whole crazy history of the Aegon's conquest. And it's but like I said, though, the only battles that actually happen in it is the battle of Storm's End when Orys Baratheon fights Argilac the Arrogant, Argilac Durrandon, who's known as Argilac the Arrogant, the last Storm King. It's just a traditional siege battle. And then you have the actual battle, the Field of Fire, as it's called, which we talked about earlier, which was Aegon and his two sisters on their, all three of them on their dragons, flying to fight this 50,000 man army, which was the combination of the Westerlands and the Reach, putting all their forces together. And it's called the Field of Fire because this whole army was set up to fight these dragons, and the field that it was was in a place where it was really hot out, and it was very dry. And it was a field of, there was like weeds and stuff like that all over the place with it. So Aegon was like, oh, perfect for Dragonfire. So instead of engaging the army and actually fighting them one-on-one with their own forces, Aegon and his sisters, they just flew around the army and just lit the grass and weeds on fire. And then just the grass fire just caved in, sort of. It just engulfed the entire army and just killed everybody there, which is crazy. And then, of course, that ends with the Reach side of it, the Reach forces who were led by House Gardner, all of them dying, and the last of the House Gardner line being killed, and most of the Lannister forces, that being the family that was in charge of the Westerlands, dying, but the Lannister family survived, and they just knelt to Aegon, and Aegon installed the Tyrells to become the new king or the new lords of the Reach. So pretty interesting stuff. But those are the only actual battles that happen. There's not really much more epic stuff after that. I mean, it's a cool scene when Rhaenys or Visenya takes the veil by tricking Robert Arryn. It's a cool scene, I'm sure, with Torrhen Stark. And it's probably a lot of cool scenes of fighting the Dornish, but like, it's not enough to do like a multiple season run, in my opinion, but that's just me talking. I'm going to say that I think it's good that they're just going to do it as a movie. But if they do it as a series, don't get me wrong, I'd be excited to see it, because, you know, that means more hours I can spend in Westeros, you know, and I mean, I would love to see that. But at the same time, I think just structurally, it would just fit better as a movie. You know, I think in Act 1, you can have Aegon on Dragonstone with the 3 dragons and Rhaenys and Visenya, and they're all hanging out. And then you can end Act 1 with him having his prophetic dream, and then him, you know, maybe Act 2 can be him starting the conquest, and Act 3 can be him finishing it, I guess. I don't really know. But I think it would just work better. But that's just me talking. But that's about it for Game of Thrones news this week. Not a whole ton of stuff, but you got to hear me ramble about Aegon's conquest. And yeah, let's play another song from Shogun's Castle, and then we'll get into Lord of the Rings news. This next song I'm going to play is from one of his more recent albums. This is from the Sacred Creed. The Sacred Creed of Devotion and Purpose, one of his more recent albums. We're going to play this song, just a quick song called Purpose. Hope you enjoy, and I'll talk to you in a minute. All right, that was Shogun's Castle with a really cool track called Purpose from the more recent album, The Sacred Creed of Devotion and Purpose. I like how the very just kind of thumpiness of that song. I like how, it's very, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of Native American powwow music, all this, like, almost, where it's that kind of thumpy, just and it made me picture kind of more indigenous kind of dances, and it has that kind of indigenous flavor to it, which I really like. And not a lot of people talk about the indigenous tribes of Japan, which is pretty interesting, and some of them still very much exist. And I believe in northern Japan, there are still indigenous tribes that still exist, and their culture is very much alive, and it's really, really interesting. And I I wasn't expecting that until I found out about it. I went, oh wow, because I kind of expected Japan to be a country that had very much began as indigenous tribes and grew into who is there now. And kind of like Europe, where a lot of the kingdoms in Europe and countries and all that stuff now originally were formed from just ancient tribes that evolved into kind of countries and kingdoms and all that stuff, which is really, really interesting to me. But anyway, what I like about that song is that it definitely taps into that very traditional vibe of kind of just ancient feudal Japan. And even to me, at least, kind of gives that atmosphere and vibe of kind of the more indigenous aspects of Japan, because from what I understand, the people of Japan, largely in the beginning, there was a land bridge between Japan and Korea. And, humans migrated over that land bridge into what is now modern day Japan. And that land bridge, went away. And then I think that's why the cultures are very distinct between Japan and Korea. That's part of it, I think, at least, is that they just were largely disconnected for a long time. But all beautiful cultures, Japan, Korea, China, Russia, Mongolia, all countries, I'm not just saying that to be super nice. It's true. All countries got their cool stuff going on. At least I hope that's politically correct to say. Anyway, well, just know that I'm not trying to be politically incorrect. There you go. I'm not trying to be. And you can disagree with whatever I say. Man, sorry that I sound so tired. I'm just taking it easy, man. I'm just taking it easy this week. That's all I'm doing. But I'll let you know that honestly, I'm tempted to go overtime this week. I'm tempted to just go well past 10 o'clock, but if only I didn't have to get up so early for work tomorrow. But, I'm here now. To quote that woman at the end of The Wrestler starring Mickey Rourke, I'm here. Let's get into a little bit of Lord of the Rings news, man. Let's cue us in, Gandalf. Oh, yeah. F yeah, man. You gotta love it. Gotta love Gandalf. So some pretty cool stuff this week with Lord of the Rings, where we have these two new actors, one heavily rumored, one sort of rumored, to be in the upcoming Hunt for Gollum movie. It's pretty obvious at this point we're going to get Aragorn recasted as a like younger actor to play him, and it's heavily rumored that I forget his name, but it's heavily rumored that a certain actor from The White Lotus is going to play the young Aragorn. And I saw a picture of him, and I remember just thinking at first, like, that guy is gonna play is gonna play Aragorn. Oh, okay, maybe I'm not sure if I love that, to be honest. However, I kind of just, I don't know, like I just sort of I kept kind of just looking at him and just kind of tried to do the math in my head, just trying to imagine him as Aragorn, And then I just thought, you know what, maybe it might work actually. And honestly, after, looking into it, and just kind of, I don't know, just trying to think like, would this work? And honestly, I'm going to be honest, I think it would work. Leo Woodall, that's his name. Oh man, he's only 29. Imagine being 29 and you get to play Aragorn. That's crazy, man. It's crazy that when I was 10, I used to think 29, that's like worlds away. But now that I'm almost 25, like that just, it seems like you're still a baby, even when you're 29, which gives me comfort. But anyway, I don't want to get into another, ramble of me rambling about age like I do every freaking show. I swear it's not coming from my insecurity. But anyway, honestly, I wasn't at first really down for it, him being Aragorn. I wasn't mad about it, of course, and I'm sure he's a great actor. I mean, he is. I loved him in White Lotus. He was a great actor there, at least. And I haven't seen him in anything else, but regardless, honestly, when I look at his face and I just imagine him in that Lothlorien, cloak, him as like just a full Dunedain ranger. Because for anybody that doesn't know, Aragorn prior to the Lord of the Rings was something called a Dunedain ranger. And they were basically an order of wilderness rangers that were entrusted to protect the land of Middle-earth, that the Shire, which is the place that all the hobbits live in, they were entrusted to protect just that whole area of the map. And the hobbits just happened to live in that part of the world. And the Dunedain also are descendants of Numenor, which was an ancient kingdom of humans that basically were all like superhuman, like all super tall and lived really long and had super awesome abilities. And the Dunedain are descendants of them. So they have long lifespans, they're tall, they have healing hands, which is really cool. And the Dunedain, Aragorn is a captain of. And so I try to imagine this guy, as like a captain of the Dunedain, like this cool fantasy ranger, protector of the wild kind of deal. And honestly, I kind of see it. I can kind of see it. I see it really well, at least in my head. And so, if it's confirmed that this guy is going to be Aragorn, I'll give it a shot. Of course, man, And I'm not just saying that to be nice. Like, I see it. And also at the end of the day, with any person recasted as Aragorn, like of course it's not going to live up to Viggo Mortensen. Like, of course not. That's like recasting like Mark Hamill, or recasting Luke Skywalker. Like Mark Hamill is Luke Skywalker. And, it's the same thing as like if you got someone else to play Anakin Skywalker. Like Hayden Christensen is Anakin Skywalker. And casting anybody else, like you shouldn't, I feel like this is just me talking, but I feel like it's just a waste of time and energy, for that matter, to just think, to just be like, to compare them to any newer up-and-coming actor or just any different actor to play that role. I just think it's not worth the time. And I think it's better to be like, okay, yeah, they're not going to live up to like the definitive version of these characters in terms of like the face of them, but let's just still have fun with it. Like you can think of it as a different version of Aragorn, but try to find some joy in this different version of him. But that's just me talking. You're allowed to just hate the hell out of this if you want to, but whatever. And you can also love it, You don't need me telling you that. But you know what? My verdict, what Vicky's verdict is that I'm looking forward to it. Man. Also, Anya Taylor-Joy, I believe her name is, who was, of course, the very popular actor who was in The Queen's Gambit. She was also in the underrated movie The Northman, which I really liked, among other things. I believe she voiced Peach, I think, in the Mario movie. She is rumored to be playing Aragorn's love interest in the Hunt for Gollum movie, which I can see it, His love interest is, of course, Arwen, which is really interesting, that she's going to probably play Arwen, but I can see it. Like, give her black hair or something like that and make her just a young Arwen. I can see it. I think that'd be really cool. I'm fine with that. She's a great actor, and also she was in The Northman, which is like a very fantasy kind of esque movie. And, keep in mind that a lot of Tolkien's influence on Middle-earth is from Norse legends. I know that the name Thorin, of course, being one of the 13 dwarves in the Hobbit book and movie, for that matter, that's a name straight up just from Norse mythology and just Norse languages. And I think also Gimli might be in there too. And other one. There's a bunch. There's just so much influence from that kind of legendarium of the Norse gods and Norse mythology and Norse languages, all that stuff. And since Anya Taylor-Joy really held her own and really worked well as a, just really pulled it off as a Norse character in the Northmen, I think she could pull it off really well being an elf. So I'm okay with it. I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I think it'll be cool. Also, we'll get into our segment of This Day in Middle-earth History. A lot has happened this week. We're finally into the part of the story where just a lot is happening. This week we got over the last week, here's what's happened with the Fellowship. Over the last week, Frodo has reached the end of the Dead Marshes, which is pretty nuts because that's a pretty gnarly part of it. That's, of course, the time when he encounters the ghosts, like ghostly spirits of the Battle of the Last Alliance, which is pretty cool. And also the Nazgul, I believe, are hunting him while flying their dragons, which is called the Fell Beasts in Middle-earth. I don't know why they're just not called dragons. Like, they're straight up, like, they are. Like, they're these giant winged serpents flying, they don't breathe fire, but, like, they're basically dragons. I don't know. I do like the name Fell Beast, though. I think it's really cool. But that happened, and on top of that, Helm's Deep has happened over this last week, the Battle of Helm's Deep, which I think is really, really cool. And on top of that, the Fall of Isengard has occurred as well, where that, of course, being when the Ents, the giant tree people who live in the forest of Fangorn Forest, which is right outside of Isengard, which is the fortress of the villain Saruman, the evil wizard, who's pretty much the main villain of the second book, The Two Towers, and the second movie. They all get together and they march upon Isengard and they destroy it. And it's such a cool scene. I love it so much, and it's a great part of the movie. So I haven't gotten there in the books yet, but it's really, really cool. Also, yeah, and Helm's Deep happened, which I kind of just glossed over. But Helm's Deep is probably, I think, aside from, I guess, like the top three most like kind of, I guess, iconic moments or just iconic parts of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I think, in no particular order, are, of course, Gandalf fighting the Balrog on the Bridge of Khazad-dûm. And then you also have the Rohirrim charge, the army of horsemen from Rohan charging into battle, just insanely just epic charge, just so cool. And then with that, probably the Battle of Helm's Deep, And I know Helm's Deep it's not a moment, it's like half the movie, but or at least like the last like chunk of it. But it definitely is one of my favorite battles from the series. I don't know if you can consider this a battle, but if it is a battle, if you agree with me that it is, the battle between the Fellowship and like the Uruk-hai group that attacks them, and it's not like a group like 10 of them, it's like at least like a few hundred of them attack the Fellowship. And so you have the 9 members of the Fellowship fighting these, like, this huge troop of Uruk-hai, or I think is it Uruk-hai or Uruk-hai? I don't know. But I've heard in the movies, the Rohirrim or the Rohan people say the Uruk-hai, but I've also heard Saruman say Uruk-hai. I like Uruk-hai. I think that sounds cool, Uruk-hai. But anyway, I digress. But that's probably my favorite battle in the series, is when the Fellowship fights the Uruk-hai, fighting them in Amon Hen, which is kind of a portion of land that used to be under the control of Gondor. Pretty interesting. But if you don't count that as a battle, I think I'm going to go probably Helm's Deep, because Helm's Deep is a really cool part of the series where the people of Rohan, the kingdom of Rohan, they flee to this ancient fortress called Helm's Deep, which is in the mountains, and they, and Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli are with them, and they basically, in the book, they have to fight off like 10,000 Uruk-hai that just attack them by surprise, pretty much, and it's 300 against 10,000 before Gandalf comes and saves the day, with a whole group of horsemen, Rohirrim, coming to just fight at the last minute. And also the Ents show up to fight the to fight the Uruk-hai as well, which is really cool. And you see that in the extended version of the movie, but the movie version of the Battle of Helm's Deep, the elves show up before the battle starts. You have a bunch of elves show up and help them out, and they fight. And it's a really awesome battle. I mean, a lot of people say it's probably the greatest medieval siege battle in the history of movies is the Battle of Helm's Deep. And it's really well done. I was obsessed with it as a kid. I drew Helm's Deep, I'm not exaggerating, probably hundreds of times. Like, I loved it. I was so obsessed with it. I watched it and rewatched it. I drew it so many times. I built it with Legos so many times, replayed it in my head. I was obsessed with Helm's Deep. And I mean, I'm not obsessed with it anymore, but it's still really, really cool. I really like it still. I like the Battle of Minas Tirith a lot more these days, but it's still really cool. I'm kind of curious how the Battle of Minas Morgul happened, because we don't see that kind of aftermath, but we know the Witch King attacks it and takes over this fortress, which is called Minas Ithil, and then he renames it Minas Morgul, which is probably my favorite castle name ever, Minas Morgul. But regardless, I digress. Over the last week, we got the Battle of Helm's Deep, the Fall of Isengard, and Frodo reaching the end of the marshes, and I believe Aragorn is now searching for the Army of the Dead, which is this ghost army in the middle of the mountains that he's looking for. I mean, they're called the Oathbreakers because in the lore of Middle-earth, prior to the start of the Lord of the Rings, when the first war that happens 3,000 years, I believe, before the events in Lord of the Rings, the first war was Sauron, the big bad of the Lord of the Rings universe, I guess outside of Morgoth. Anyway, I'm not going to go there. That's just going to be a whole lore dump. In that war, they were called upon, the men of Dunharrow, as they're called in the mountains, and they refused to fight for humanity, to fight Sauron, and so they were cursed never to rest until they fulfilled their oath, which was to fight for Middle Earth, which they broke then. And when Aragorn realizes and finds out that the Rohan forces that he's riding with after Helm's Deep to go help out Gondor, when they're when the city of Minas Tirith is under attack, when he realizes they don't have enough men to fight, he is pushed by Elrond of Rivendell, at least in the movie he is, to go seek the help of the Oathbreakers. And he finds them deep in the mountains. They're a bunch of ghosts at this point because they've never been allowed to rest, so their spirits are still on Earth. And he convinces them to fight for Aragorn. And in the books, they show up to fight in the books, they just fight off a bunch of corsair ships, which is a bunch of evil pirates, basically, sailing down to Minas Tirith to help the bad guys, the orcs of Mordor. And in the books, they just destroy all those guys. In the movies, what I like a lot more is they do that, and then they get on the boats, and once they arrive, they surprise attack the orcs with this army of unbeatable ghosts, because they're ghosts. They're not like, the orcs can't defeat them, so they just show up to Minas Tirith with this enormous army of ghosts and save the day. And I personally think I personally like it more than the books. I think it's a better change, but that's just me. In the books, when he shows up with the boats, he actually filled them with a bunch of just, I think, Gondorian reinforcements to show up and fight. But I personally like the Oathbreakers showing up, not just to fulfill their oath in the sense of, stopping the pirates, but now they're showing up to straight up win the war, or win the battle, rather. And it's the greatest battle of that age in Middle-earth, which is pretty cool. Because at this point, I believe there are 7 ages in Middle-earth, and an age is just kind of a block of time. Kind of like how there's the Paleolithic era on Earth and blah, 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 and all this stuff. In Middle-earth, there's like different ages. First age, second age, you know what I mean? And this is the 3rd age that Lord of the Rings is taking place in. And the Battle of Minas Tirith, which is when the forces of Mordor attack Minas Tirith, which is this big city, basically, in Gondor, the main kingdom of humans. The riders of Rohan from a kingdom of Rohan, a neighboring kingdom, come to defend it, and then but that's not even enough though. And then the Oathbreakers show up to save the day, which is so cool. It's such an epic battle. I love it. It's probably my favorite battle, I guess, aside from the Battle of Amonhen, but if it's not a battle, But pretty eventful, though, this week for Game of Thrones, for Lord of the Rings. A lot of stuff happened, man. I'm glad that we're out of the period of time where they're taking like 3 weeks just to get to Rivendell, and all I'm reading is like crossing the wild, or resting in Rivendell. I'm glad stuff's actually happening now. It's cool, man. It's cool. We'll probably read about or talk about the Battle of Minas Tirith. We'll get into the details of it next week then, which will be pretty cool. We're actually kind of getting close, dude. We got pretty much, over the past week, we pretty much got all the way through Two Towers. All of Two Towers occurred over the last week, basically, which is pretty crazy. But next week, and now we're pretty much in the beginning of Return of the King, which is pretty cool. And we're probably going to finish the trilogy relatively soon, which is crazy. I don't know if we're just going to restart it or we'll do another book, but I don't know. We'll see. We will see, my man. We will see. I might do the Silmarillion, which is the history book of Middle-earth, and just do kind of dates of that afterwards, so that, because I'm tempted to just restart Lord of the Rings and just do this continuous loop of just Lord of the Rings, this day in Lord of the Rings kind of deal. But I might just do Silmarillion and cover all the stuff that happened in that book, but we'll see, man. We'll see. It'll give me a chance to ramble about Middle-earth history, which will be fun. But anyways, let's play a couple ads for you, and then we'll play another bit of Shogun's Castle, and then we'll get into a little bit of horror movie news, and then I'll jump into nerd news, and we'll play some more music, and then I'll do a little review for you for Phantom of the Mall. But yeah, anyway, I'll talk to you in a minute. Hope you enjoy.
Royal Junction Indian Cuisine and Bar is a proud sponsor of 88-1 The Berg.
Royal Junction is an Indian family-style restaurant located on the first floor of the 420 building at 420 North Pearl Street, right next to the Clymer Museum.
They're now offering a new menu with late-night bites after 10 p.m. and are open Monday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to midnight. If you would like to find out more or place an order, you can visit their website at rjellensburg.com or by calling them at 509-201-1012.
88.1 The Berg would like to thank our proud sponsor, Ellensburg Central Transit.
Operating 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., Ellensburg Central Transit is Ellensburg's public transit service.
Stops include Fred Meyer, Safeway, The Verge, and Brooklane Village.
All buses have bike racks and are ADA accessible.
For bus routes, stops, and pickup times, the transit app is available for download.
More information can be found on their website at centraltransit.org.
Oh, right. That was, of course, Shogun's Castle with those two really cool tracks. The first one being Gratitude, the second one being Devotion, and those are from the more recent album, The Sacred Creed of Devotion and Purpose by Shogun's Castle. You can check it out on Spotify, Apple Music, Bandcamp, and YouTube. If you liked it. Even if you don't like it, check it out on those platforms and give it another chance because it's really good. But yeah, let's get into a little bit of horror movie news, man. Ow! F yeah. This week with horror movie news, nothing really crazy. We got that new movie, The Bride, that's come out. Of course, it being the new movie with Christian Bale playing Frankenstein, and of course the main character being the bride of Frankenstein. And I've been meaning to watch it. Seems pretty interesting. I mean, I'm a huge Christian Bale fan, so I'll check it out. I think it looks cool. Also, Scream 7 is apparently just doing really good in theaters, and that's awesome, man. I'm more so excited just for Scary Movie, but Scream 7 I'm really curious to check out. I really want to. I've only seen the first 3 movies, though. I haven't seen the other... You haven't seen 4 or 5 or 6, but I definitely want to. Don't get me wrong. Pretty cool though, man. If you're a big fan, go check it out, man. I love the. I've always really liked the look of Ghostface, who's the main villain in the Scream movies. He's the iconic serial killer with the mask on his face, and you never know who's Ghostface in each movie. And it's a really fun part of those movies is you're kind of guessing the whole time who is Ghostface, and it's always revealed at the end who is wearing the mask. And it's really, really cool. He's definitely probably I almost burped into the friggin' microphone. But what was I gonna say? I like the look of Ghostface the most. Not the most, a lot. But I think I like him as a character the most out of all the major slasher, serial killer, just monster-y, like all those guys. You got Freddy, you got Jason, you got Chucky, you got Michael Myers, you got Leatherface, you got Pinhead. That kind of era of like 70s, 80s, and 90s kind of like horror villains that are just very bloody. He's probably my favorite of them all in terms of just character. If it came down to just looks, Pinhead probably, and I also just think he's a really cool character. But I like, if it just is based purely on personality, motivation, blah, 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 and also how they think and how they like kind of plan out their kills and stuff like that, definitely Ghostface. Because Ghostface isn't like this super powerful... He's not like Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers where like nothing can stop him. He's a character that like is a dude in a costume with a knife. And so he has to like very strategically plan what he's doing. And that's what I really like about him. But yeah, if you are a big fan of Scream, dude, check it out. Check it out. But yeah, let's get into general nerd news. Here we go.
Nerd alert!
Oh yeah, nerd alert. Let me get a woo, Ric Flair. Woo! Haven't heard that in a while. Also a
Oh yeah!
All right. Hey Brody, you want to talk about nerd news?
Yes.
Okay. Just 2 little things that happened this week that I thought were kind of cool. Matthew McConaughey is apparently going to be the Green Goblin in the next, I'm assuming, Sony Spider-Man movie. I mean, I'm looking forward to that. I was surprised to see that, to be honest, but I think it's fair that they cast him because he would probably work really well as a kind of just Norman Osborn kind of character, in the sense that he would play Norman Osborn really well where we wouldn't see him as like a villain and then he would become Green Goblin and then he's a full-on villain because I remember hearing my roommate talk about this and he was like, oh yeah, like the thing about Willem Dafoe, like of course he's awesome as Green Goblin, but I think the difference here is that Matthew McConaughey would be a great just charismatic, just kind of more charismatic genius that is Norman Osborn. And then when he becomes the Green Goblin, that's when he's going to come out like the crazy villain aspect to him. Whereas Willem Dafoe is, of course, like a more normal version of himself when he's Norman Osborn. But at the same time, when he becomes Green Goblin, it's more just kind of this amplified version of who he already was. So I like that point because I feel like there'll be a noticeable difference here. Because when you play a character like the Green Goblin, you're really playing 2 different guys. You're Norman Osborn and then you're Green Goblin. It's kind of like... It's kind of like Batman and Bruce Wayne almost, where they're two different people, really, or two different aliases. But that's pretty interesting. Also, Mark Hamill is going to be cast in The Batman Part 2, which I'm excited for. I mean, him being the voice of the Joker for so many years with Batman in the animated series. I believe he was the Joker in the... he was also Joker in Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. And also on top of that, I believe he was also in The New Adventures of Batman, playing that same character, which is pretty interesting. And he also, of course, was the Joker in the Batman Arkham games. He's just definitively the voice of the Joker, which is really cool. And I'm excited to see him in this movie. I mean, I hope it's confirmed that he's actually going to be in the Batman Part 2, because I'm curious what role he would play. You know, because he can't be the Joker, because they already got a Joker. And he can't voice that Joker, because that Joker is already voiced. So I'm just curious who he would play. But, I mean, I'm excited for it regardless. Mark Hamill, he's a great voice actor, just great actor all around. Like, that's for sure. As much as people love him as Luke Skywalker, he's also just so good as a voice actor, and I love him as the Joker. He is the Joker. Like, when I think of, like, you know, definitively when I picture in my head, like, you know, the definitive version of the Joker, I think of the animated series, Batman the Animated Series Joker. Like that, like specifically the early episodes version before his eyes were like black for some reason. That still looks cool, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, when I think of, like, if I had to show somebody a picture and be like, this is the Joker, and they'd never heard of him before, I would be like, this is the definitive look of the Joker, and let me play you a video of him so you can hear definitively how he sounds and laughs and everything. And that's Mark Hamill's Joker. So, yeah, pretty cool stuff. But let's play another Shogun's Castle song, and then we'll get into my movie review of Phantom of the Mall from the 80s, starring Pauly Shore, of course. This next song is also from Shogun's Castle. It'll be the last track I play of Shogun's Castle for this episode. This song is from the same album, The Sacred Creed of Devotion and Purpose. This song is called Wisdom. Hope you enjoy. Talk to you in a minute. All right, that was Wisdom from Shogun's Castle. I hope you enjoyed that track. I liked it, man. That was just kind of a very peaceful kind of atmosphere. I mean, I just throw atmosphere around all the time. I love atmosphere. But that definitely was a vibe that made me really feel like I was kind of... It almost made me feel like I was in a monastery just meditating, you know, which is a big dream of mine. Big dream of mine to do that in an actual kind of Zen Buddhist monastery and... in Japan, and that would just be so cool, so cool. They're really, I mean, I've sort of been to a Buddhist monastery before. I went to one in Berlin, in Germany, which is pretty cool. It was a Buddhist house that Buddhists lived in, which was really cool. And really interesting stuff. I mean, it had a lot of stuff in it, but it was so just like, it was so serene. It was so peaceful and just, it was so quiet. I remember walking in there and I was like, man, you could hear a pin drop in here, man. Like, you could hear a pin drop from like the other side of the house. It was that freaking quiet. But it was a pretty interesting time, pretty interesting moment. I don't know why I brought that up, but interesting experience, man. Interesting. But you gotta love that. You gotta love Shogun's Castle. But yeah, let's get into my review of course, the movie Phantom of the Mall from the 80s, starring Pauly Shore. I liked the movie. I watched it today, from 1989, by the way. I watched it today, and I thought it was actually really cool. I mean, I didn't love it. It's not like an amazing movie. I definitely, as I'm like digging deep to find, more underground movies that genuinely not a lot of people talk about, yeah, there's underground movies, quote unquote, that are, quote unquote underground, but really at this point enough people know about them that they're not really like underground anymore. And it's kind of the same with, and that's not a bad thing. Like, I'm not trying to say that's a bad thing, or I'm not trying to sound like a hipster kind of guy or anything like that. But, fan bases grow to a point where, I don't know, maybe I'm just missing something, but I don't know. I'm not trying to offend anybody. But you like what you like, that's all good. But this is a movie where I was like, okay, legitimately, this movie, like, no one talks about. And it sounded really cool. The full title is Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge, which is really, really cool. And it's a movie, the premise of the movie is a newly built mall. It's been built in a small town, I'm assuming. They don't really show the small town at all, but I'm assuming that's where it is. And it stars a group of teenagers, 2 women that are newly employed there, on top of Pauly Shore being their close friend, and then a photographer who's helping to kind of cover the journalistic story of the mall being made. And the main character, her boyfriend died in a house fire about a year before this movie begins, and she keeps having like kind of flashbacks and visions of him. And this also weird phantom kind of guy is haunting the mall and like picking off people one by one. And it's soon revealed, spoiler alert, that it's her ex-boyfriend, and he has like these burn scar marks on him, and he has a whole layer underneath the mall, and that's where he practices his karate and stuff like that. And it's pretty cool. And it's a cool movie. I definitely enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. The acting isn't great. You can understand why Pauly Shore doesn't talk about being in this movie. It's because, the acting isn't amazing, but it's a fun movie, though. It's fun. It has its flaws, but it's fun. Did I enjoy watching it? Yeah. And did it have some, like, cool, like, special effects in it? Yeah. I mean, I thought it was kind of cool. The kills are really fun. And I think my favorite character has to be the mall cop that they discover was the one who started the house fire, the year prior, mainly because the mall cop is so unhinged. Like, he's chasing after the photographer gets a snapshot of him, and the photographer runs into this glass elevator that's in a lot of malls, where like it goes up and, one side of it is glass to look at, the rest of the mall. And he barely misses it. The mall cop and the journalist photographer gets in there, and the photographer thinks he's fine. And then all of a sudden, you just get a jump scare of the cop climbing over the top of the elevator and is looking at him upside down. He's like, ah! And it's kind of funny, to be honest. But that character I love because he's so unhinged, but also he's also played by the actor who plays Mac's dad, who's in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And if you've watched that show, you'll know how funny that is. Mac's dad in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, of course, being like this totally crazy, unhinged criminal, just funny weirdo. And yeah, he's pretty crazy. But that's one of the things that I thought was cool, because I didn't know he was in this movie. And I was like, hey, it's Mac's dad. I didn't know that. But I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought it was cool. It had a lot of cool kills. It had a fun story. I liked Pauly Shore's performance. I thought he was cool. The acting is sometimes like way too over the top, but in a good way, I mean, where there's a character that's kind of the the man who built the mall, his son, he has a bad relationship with, and his son is like walking into camera to like talk to his dad, and his dad has like this very cartoony, like annoyed look on his face, and he's also like winding up his head, like to like he like has this look of disgust on his face, and he's just moving his head around and around to just get ready to just spew anger at his son, and it's really funny because it's like, man, that's just straight up out of a cartoon, but all right. But yeah, anyway, I thought the movie was really cool overall. I thought it was fun. It definitely has its flaws. Like if it had better acting, like the acting is the main part of it that sucks. Like it doesn't have great acting, but it's a fun movie and it's a cool story. I like the idea of like a phantom being in a mall in the 80s. Like it's cool. But it's fun to watch Pauly Shore. It's fun to watch the Phantom himself. I mean, yeah, the acting's not great, but he's pretty good. And also Mac's dad was fun to see. The relationship between the father and the son, you know, the father being the guy who built the mall, was cool. But yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought it was cool. I'm going to give it like a 6.5 out of 10. I thought it wasn't too bad. I thought it was a pretty fun movie. So yeah, 6.5 out of 10. And if you want to check it out, it's called Phantom of the Mall, Eric's Revenge. It's not on any streaming platforms, but it is on YouTube for free. Like, people have just uploaded the movie, and you can just watch it there. So if you want to check it out, it's on YouTube, and it's a fun movie. I think it's entertaining. You know, I think it's an entertaining movie, and I enjoyed watching it. I would recommend watching it with a group of people, and I mean, I just had more fun watching it with my friend today. So yeah, I mean, anyways, it's a good movie. It's a good movie. Check it out. It's not the best, but it's a good movie. I'm going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. And would I watch it again? Sure. Yeah, I'd watch it again. Like, why not? If I just am kind of bored one night, you know, why not? If I'm with a group of friends, for sure I would watch it with them. I think there was a lot of moments where me and my friend Taylor, we just laughed at it. You know, Taylor, if you remember being on the show a few weeks ago to talk about Dune, we watched this movie today, and we had fun watching it. We had some laughs, had some good moments. The kills are really good in this movie. They're pretty gruesome. So if you like the kills in slasher movies, it's definitely good. And I also like that the Phantom has like a layer underneath the mall, which is really fun. And he makes his mask from cutting off a piece of a mannequin to use as this like Phantom of the Opera kind of mask, which I think is cool. So that's good. The layer is cool. I like the idea of a Phantom of the Mall. The kills are really good, and there's straight up karate fights between the Phantom and other characters, which is really cool. So that's fun. And Pauly Shore is fun to watch, and the father-son dynamic between those two characters is really fun too. So yeah, like there's a lot of fun, engaging moments of it, and you also get to see Pauly Shore ride a motorcycle with his friend in the sidecar, which is just kind of fun too. And it ends in a big explosion, which is cool too. And it's not exactly confirmed that the Phantom dies, so maybe we'll get a sequel, you know, like 30 years later, 40 years later rather. We'll see. But yeah, anyways, so that was pretty much the show for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. And in terms of like advice that I've been thinking about this week, I mean, you can take it or leave it. It's all good. Like, no pressure. Just take it with a grain of salt. But I think what has been sticking with me this week is if there's a will, there's a way. You know, if you want to accomplish anything or just do anything, like even if it's not considered, I guess, a quote-unquote accomplishment, if there's a will, there's a way. And I think another way of saying that is just keep at it. You know, if you got to change it up, try it a different way, do it, man. Because I don't think, you know, I remember coming to the conclusion over there are certain things in life, certain battles that aren't worth fighting. And I feel that there's a difference between withdrawing from something and giving up on something, you know. And I feel that there's certain things in life that, you know, it's better to just realize, okay, this isn't really worth it. Even if I won this battle, I know for a fact, like truthfully and honestly, if I actually fought this battle for as long as I have to and as hard as I have to, even if I won this battle and got the rewards, it wouldn't be worth what just everything I have to put into it. And so therefore, I'm not going to fight this anymore. And to me, that's withdrawing, not giving up. And giving up, I feel, means you're fighting a battle that you know will be well worth the fight and well worth the rewards, and yet you're choosing to not fight it anymore because you just want comfort again. And I think that's the difference between those two. And so it just kind of comes down to, if you want to accomplish something, if there's a will, there's a way. But also, don't burn yourself out, man. Don't burn yourself out. It's good to have a good reset button once in a while and just kind of assess, hey, is this truthfully worth it? And I don't mean like give up because it's just starting to get hard. I just mean, realize like, okay, truthfully, if I keep doing this, will I legitimately feel by the end of it that it was worth it? And if I legitimately don't think I will, truthfully, honestly, objectively, I will withdraw. Or perhaps before you choose to withdraw, try it in a different way. Try a different way. And, because I think at that point, if you tried multiple different ways to get that goal and it just sucked every time, then, that's just, maybe not do it, but that's just me talking. It's your life. You can do whatever you want. And, but yeah, and hey, whether it's good times or bad times, man, just make the most of wherever you are. It doesn't matter how good or bad things are, you can always make the most of it. You really can. There's always things there that you can work with. Like here, I mean, I'm not loving Ellensburg, but I chose to start this show to kind of help have more fun here. I ride horses at a ranch here to help have more fun. And, I really wanted to do photography, and I remember complaining all the time and being like, oh, there's nothing for me to take pictures of. It's like this town in the middle of nowhere. What am I going to take pictures of? And I remember the other night, I just was like, all right, you know what? I bought this camera months ago. I haven't used it yet. And I think it's just my negative mindset that's holding me back. And so I just was like, all right, I'm going to go for a walk with my camera, and I'm going to take a bunch of snapshots of stuff, and then I'm going to see what I got at the end of that. And by the end of it, I actually had some pretty cool stuff, like stuff that I thought was pretty cool. And now I'm excited to like go do that in other places of the town, and just take pictures and just, I just am discovering, oh, wow, there's more here than I even thought before when I already thought there was a bunch of stuff I was doing here. And so, you can always do that with stuff. You can always just find, sometimes the opportunities are hidden. Sometimes they're hidden. And just, keep looking, man. If you want more out of life, just keep looking. That's all I'm saying. But the main piece of advice, though, is if there's a will, there's a way. And I think that adds into it. If you want to do stuff and you don't think you're in the ideal conditions, I think you still can do a version of it, which is better than nothing. But yeah, anyways, I hope you enjoyed the show this week. And just stay positive, stay opportunistic, optimistic, keep moving forward, keep pushing hard. And and know that I'm there with you in spirit. Know that I'm there with you. Know that in the hardest of times, know that I'm rooting for you. Hardest of times. And know that in the best of times, I'm cheering you on. But yeah, next week, we'll be back at it again with another episode. Actually, next week and the week afterwards, we will not be having Vicky's Dungeon due to me being out of town. I'm going to be visiting home this coming weekend, and then I'm going to be going to New York City for about a week before I fly back, before I fly back and then start the next quarter. But until then, though, I wish you guys all the best, and we'll be coming back, and we'll be coming back harder and crazier than ever. And yeah, but anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you guys in a few weeks. And until then, wish you the best. All right, see y'all later.
Support for 88.1 The Berg comes from Ellensburg Planned Parenthood, located at 613 North Pine Street.
They offer services such as STI testing, birth control, wellness exams, and more.
For more information or to book an appointment, you can call them at 866-904-7721 or visit their website at